Welcome to Under the Microscope, your go-to podcast for materials and nanoscience. I'm your host, Dr. Pranoti Kshirsagar. Together on this podcast, we explore the fascinating world of nanoscience, where the smallest discoveries make the biggest impact. With each episode, I introduce you to a scientist working in the field of materials and nanoscience. As part of our commitment to fostering scientific engagement, every guest on Under the Microscope podcast also gets access to our Blue Sky account for one entire week. This is a rotation curation account on Blue Sky with the same name as the podcast, Under the Microscope. This is where the scientists communicate directly with you, my lovely audience. So make sure you are following along on Blue Sky as well. And if you're not yet, the link is in the description and the show notes. All right, in today's episode, I have a very special guest for you, who is also the next QuanTour hero. The Science Talk is the official science communication partner of this brilliantly amazing project, QuanTour, an outreach project funded by the German Physics Society. To know more about QuanTour and also follow along the journey of this quantum light source traveling across Europe, make sure you follow the Instagram account, quantour.eu. The link for that is also in the show notes and the description, and also the QuanTour websites where you can learn more about this particular project. And while you're at it, make sure that you are hitting that follow button on your favorite podcast app. And if you're watching on YouTube, yes, the video of this podcast goes on the YouTube channel of the Science Talk. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button. There are multiple different ways of showing your support for the podcast, and subscribing and following or even leaving a review is the most easiest and the most convenient thing for you to do. I'm also going to put the link to the newsletter of the Science Talk, which you can also sign up for if you're interested. All of these links that I'm mentioning are in the show notes and the episode description. All right, without further delay, let's get into today's episode. But first, a very quick word from our sponsor today, Twitter Insights Pro.
If you've ever wanted to secure your Twitter archive, align your tweets with your evolving brand, or even repurpose your best content for other platforms like LinkedIn or Instagram, this is for you. With Twitter Insights Pro, you'll get a detailed, organized overview of every tweet you've ever posted, complete with visual documentation. It's an easy way to preserve your online presence and expand your influence. Check out the link in the episode description to learn more and take the first step today.
Today we have with us the next QuanTour hero. After Meter, the next QuanTour hero, and that is Emanuele Pelucchi, who is a group leader at the Tyndall National Institute in Ireland, which is associated with University College Cork, also in Ireland. And his group is called Epitaxy and Physics of Nanostructures. So I'm really curious to figure out what exactly is he gonna do with the quantum light source that is following around Europe with the QuanTour project. So please join me in welcoming Emanuele Pelucchi. Emanuele, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm alive, as I say, very often.
Lovely to have you under the microscope. And as you are the next QuanTour hero after Meter at Aturi, the suitcase, the QuanTour suitcase with the quantum light source will be coming to you. So let's start by understanding your research. So your group you mentioned is called Epitaxy and Physics of Nanostructure. So what exactly do you do? Could you explain your research to us in super simple words, please?
Yeah, so I do similar things to what the other participants in the QuanTour do, in the sense of looking at single quantum dots or multiple quantum dots and structures and try to get quantum light out of them so that we can potentially one day do some quantum computing or quantum cryptography and things. So the group structure is broader than just that. That is why the name nanostructures, but it doesn't actually specify quantum dots or quantum optics, because most of my activities actually are making objects by a technique which is called metal organic vapor phase epitaxy, which is one of the possible alternatives to make semiconductors. And we make 3-5 semiconductors, which are gallium arsenide, indium phosphide, and alloys of all these things. And they are used in general for making more conventional classical devices than just quantum dots or quantum light, lasers, modulators typically, but also high-speed transistors or more exotic devices. So we do, as a group, a lot of these things. We actually made the material, and then we collaborate with other groups which will actually make the device out of our material. While the dots, we make them ourselves. So we make a very special quantum dot system, which is probably in the QuanTour picture. I'm the only one who does side-controlled dots. Not that other groups don't work on side-controlled quantum dots, but I am specialized on doing side-controlled quantum dots. We know what they are because we pre-make holes into a piece of gallium arsenide crystalline structure, and then we seal the hole. And in this process of sealing the hole, if you do it right, you form a quantum dot or many quantum dots. And then we can do exactly what the quantum source, which is coming to us, does, emit single photons or entangled photons, and eventually even more complicated objects like cluster states. And so this side, if we can prove we can do that, which is one of the ambition of the group to be able to do that.
You are doing quite a lot, so it only makes sense that there is quite a lot. So I have a multitude of questions. So you mentioned site-controlled quantum dots.
Yeah.
I remember with Armando and Ronaldo, they grow their quantum dots, and Armando is doing the relaxed quantum dot, and Ronaldo was stressing the quantum dots to make sure that they're aligning in way.
Yeah, or Pascal Solenar is doing a different type of quantum dots called Strangli-Castano quantum dots, which are also relaxing, but in a different way from the one Armando is doing. All these systems have something in common. You send material on the surface of your gallium arsenide wafer, you get blobs on the surface, randomly nucleated, and then some of those blobs become quantum dots. That's where they stop. And then if they want to do devices, they need to look where the dot is with an optical microscope, laser lithography, and things of this type. And once you've done that, you know where they are, you know which one you want, and then you eventually build a device around the dot. This is the approach of the community in a broad sense. What we try to do is something which is historically a bit more difficult, but might be potentially rewarding on the long run, which is pre-pattern the gallium arsenide wafer with holes. So we already make the holes where we want them. We have a lithographic mask, like you do a silicon chip, the same thing, right? Same technology you do a transistor with, but you do holes on your surface. And then once we know the holes, we deposit layers. We simply form flat surfaces where the atom diffusion, your atoms will diffuse in a particular way. They tend to fill the hole more than they tend to deposit outside the hole. And the final result of this is, if you do things right, a quantum dot or many quantum dots on top of each other. We can do that easily. So once you find out how to do that, you know where they are. That's why site control. The site, the location of the dot is known in advance. Potentially, this means that you can put it on chip where you want, and then don't need to look for the good dots. They're already there. They're already where you put them. And this could make lithography or the processing afterwards easier, especially large-scale integration is easier. Now, how much that will actually be the case, only the future tells. We are learning how to overcome other problems which come with site control. So the idea is very nice, but then there are other issues that needs to be done very well, and we're working on it. That's the only thing I can say. We have some very good results, but not enough,
right,
to scale, to claim that we can do 1 million identical dots on chip. We cannot do that yet.
No, not yet. That's why it is still in the lab, right? You need to optimize it in the lab, and then once you're ready, then you can turn it into maybe a spin-off or take it to the industry, to the production line, which is also really fascinating.
Few microns.
A few microns, okay.
You can make holes for anything from 300 nanometers to 20 microns.
Right.
The technology works in all cases. And it's shaped like a pyramid. So it's actually, so gallium arsenide is a single crystal, and it's a single crystal which has a cubic structure, but we cut the wafer along the diagonal of the cube. We asked the manufacturers of the wafer to cut it along the diagonal of the cube. And then if you wet etch, you put them in an acid, you will make a hole which shows 3 crystalline facets, which are called 111A facets. And those are the facets we deposit material on.
Okay. So let's say your holes are a few micron at the top, and the deeper you go, the smaller, of course.
The smaller they become. So they have an apex which is nanometers big.
Okay, and the idea is to have the nanodot at the apex, not at the top.
Yes, but you fill the hole.
Yeah.
And then what you do is your holes become smaller and smaller. And at the center, where it's very steep, you can, you're right. You nucleate the dot there at the very center, where you have a base of anything between 10 to 16 nanometer. So your object is big 10 or 16 nanometer, depending on that base, and the height you can decide by growing more or less. That would be anything between 2 nanometers to 5, 6 nanometers, depending on the system you're working on.
Okay, so it's basically the way that you're creating these, or fabricating, let's say, or growing these quantum dots.
Yeah, growing is the right
growing
word, which we use in jargon. We grow semiconductors.
Growing quantum dots, because depositing quantum dot does not sound right to my materials and nanoscience brain. It just doesn't make any sense. So let's just go with the jargon term of growing the quantum dot. So now your quantum dot is upside down on your substrate. So what you essentially need to do is to flip it and then dissolve the gallium arsenide, or...
Sometimes we do that, yes. So if you can leave it in there, there's no problem, but you don't extract much light. Very often what we do is do exactly that. We glue this thing onto something, we flip it upside down, and we remove everything else apart from the pyramid. And like this, we can collect a lot more light with a lens or with an objective. If you want to collect more, you need to do something more sophisticated, like a cavity, like the one which
Pascal.
is going around in the tour. Yeah, Pascal, or the one, or the bullseye cavity, which is in the QuanTour,
right,
in the QuanTour process, which we will receive. So that allows to collect a lot more light in a specific direction.
Right. So your final substrate, when you're actually doing the measurements, like optical measurements or whatever kinds of measurement, your final sample would look like a pyramid with the quantum dot at the apex, or at the top, at the tip.
It's inside it. It's a bit inside it. Then it's not exactly at the tip. It's 100 nanometer below the tip. Yes.
Why is it 100 nanometers below?
Oh, because if it's exactly at the surface, you damage it, and it's not going to emit very nicely.
True.
So you need to have it inside a few hundred nanometers. It depends on how big the pyramid is.
But how do you go? Wait. So I'm thinking now, because you have deposited the pyramid, or you have deposited like an upside down pyramid, and then you flip it, and then you have the standing pyramid, and in a 2D structure, it would look like a cone of sorts with the quantum dot at the top, but not at the tip, but like...
Yeah, so we deposit more other material before the dot. So what we will have is a sacrificial layer, which can be etched away or stop the etching, which is called aluminum gallium arsenide, with a lot of aluminum in it. The dot will be gallium arsenide or indium gallium arsenide. And so we first deposit material which which makes the pyramid smaller, but the original one is still big. And then we deposit the dot, and then we keep going, depositing more to have a barrier for the dot. After we've done that, we flip it out, etch away, and we keep the original structure. So somewhere in there is a dot in the middle of the code, which is actually a pyramid with a triangular base. So that can be 100 nanometer or 50 nanometer or 300 nanometers away from the surface. We can decide where to put it. There are magic positions which work best.
Interesting. Can you please send me like a schematic of how the different process, like all of this works? I would love to add this to the video.
Yeah.
So the podcast listeners on
Good.
Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening, make sure you check out the YouTube video as well, because that is where you will see the visual representation of what Emanuele was trying to explain to me. That sounds really fascinating. So is this what you mean with epitaxy?
Epitaxy is what Armando Rastelli does or Pascal Sennelaar does in different technique, molecular beam epitaxy instead of microorganic vapor phase epitaxy. But the word epitaxy is there in both. It means simply that we're sending atoms on a surface. The crystalline surface forces those atoms to incorporate at the crystal site. So we maintain the crystallinity as we grow. As soon as you maintain the crystallinity as you grow or deposit, that's epitaxy.
So let's talk a bit about the application of these site-controlled quantum dots that you are creating.
The application is the same as the other quantum dots, but potentially the fact that we know where they are allows them to be more integrable. You can put them on chip in big numbers in a more easy way. If you have random distribution, you have a dot and you have to have a waveguide which goes from the dot to another device which processes the light of the dot on chip. If you need to find out where one dot is, where the second dot is, where the third dot is, where the fourth dot is, and then design the waveguides, it's actually very demanding. As soon as you move from 2 to 3 dots on, finding 3 good dots on chip is okay. It's work, but it's okay. Finding 1,000 of them, it's an impossible task, however good PhD students are. So we are trying to address that. We're trying to put 1,000 dots where we already know they are good.
And how many do you have so far?
So we can put millions of dots on chip, but only 10% of them could be very good. 10%. So we're still fading on the high-level reproducibility of getting the dots exactly the way we would like them to be. We're working on it.
So you have the 10%, let's say, success rate or conversion rate.
They're all dots, but only a fraction of them is really good. So only a fraction of them can be used. So it's too low.
So the idea, in principle, you can do millions or 2 million dots as well. It's just the matter of the homogeneous quality
output.
Homogeneous output. And let's say 10% are the best quality. But if you are using them on a device, all of them need to have the same quality, right? That is very important. And now your group is also then focusing on making this, bringing this 10% to maybe 99% or 90%.
That's one of the things we're trying to do. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. That makes, and you're absolutely right. The fact that you know where the good ones are or where exactly the quantum dots are in the first place, that already is a win. And then finding the perfect ones and then reproducing these results multiple times. And that is the challenge that, one of the challenges that your group is working on. That is really interesting and very fascinating for me because this is, wow.
Quick break from the conversation. Just a reminder about Twitter Insights Pro. If you're looking to protect your Twitter history and make sure your brand stays consistent across platforms, this is the solution. With our service, you can easily download, organize, and repurpose your Twitter archive, turning your old tweets into new content for LinkedIn, Instagram, or even newsletters. Want to know more? The link is in the episode description. Don't miss.
Your research is super cool. What I'm curious about is your career journey. How did you become, now that you are the group leader of Epitaxy and Physics of Nanostructures at the Tyndall Institute in Ireland? How did that happen?
Okay, so I'm from Milan. I went to study in Milan, Polytechnic of Milan. I got a master. I was an odd master in electronic engineering, but I really liked physics and math. So I took all the physics and math exams I could take. I'm a weird mixture of things. Electronic engineering, focused on nuclear physics and such things. And I got a position in Trieste, the national laboratory of the Institute for Physics of Matter in Italy, which doesn't exist anymore, but at the time existed. And we looked at interfaces. We were depositing our material, and then we were looking how the electronic levels of its interfaces were forming by doing photoemission, meaning that you send X-rays and you look at the electrons coming out. And then I finished my PhD, and I was moving on, looking for a postdoc position. And so I went to Lausanne. So they were looking for somebody to model what they were doing there, which was big group quantum wires. And largely, I was coming as a postdoc, so I started helping, and then it became my main research topic because it worked so nicely. After 5 years, so I was looking for a position, and Tyndall was looking for somebody who knew how to make material and who would write the project. I submitted, and I got the project, so that's why I'm here.
Okay, and since when are you at Tyndall now?
2007.
Wow.
1st of January, 2nd of January.
Wow. That is,
So
you're coming close to 17 years now, 18 years soon.
Yeah, it's a long time. White beard. I didn't have a white beard when I arrived here.
Yeah, and you're happy at Tyndall now? You're happy in Ireland? You don't miss Italy?
I miss Italy, but that's where I am. It's hard work to get things going, and I'm not really going to move. The problem with these groups is that there's a huge investment to build the structure. Leaving means restarting from nothing. It's not advisable.
Absolutely. And I also relate with the fact that you have already established your life, your lab, your research group, everything, the system, how it works. The reason to move will have to be really good. Really good.
Yeah.
So from Italy to Switzerland to Ireland.
Yeah. I moved north.
You moved north. You were like, okay, enough with the sunshine. I have had enough. I need to be in a cold and rainy place.
And rainy place. Yeah, that's quite a good description. Yeah.
That's where you can do really good science. So no, I'm kidding.
Yeah. There's a lot of motivation to work here.
Exactly. Because then you're not feeling guilty. The weather is so nice. The beach is only half-hour drive. This keeps you in the lab. Of course, this is a joke for listeners. This is a joke. We are messing around. We want all the scientists to be happy. You do not need to be cold and rainy to be productive. But this is really interesting. It's always fascinating for me when people are moving around. And usually the scientists are moving from master's to PhD to postdoc, second postdoc, or whatsoever, before they put their roots down, so to say, their science roots down to start their own group. And it also means that you do have very different and diverse sort of experience from different labs and different countries. Also in your case, where you have worked on very different kinds of research projects, might be in the same field or the same area, but you did mention you did work with quantum dots and also surface science. Emanuele, it sounds to me that you have been involved in very interesting research projects. I'm going to ask you to pick one research project that you're super proud of and the most fun and quirky one, and explain it to us in simple words in the section we call In Other Words. So, go. Please don't hate me.
I'm actually quite happy to talk about it. So there are different types of research projects, right, where you sometimes you just hit into something which is great, and you're good when you recognize it to be great, and then you keep it running. In a way, quantum dots have been this for me. They work very nicely day one, and been building research lines on that. The one that I want to talk about is a bit of a different one, where not so interesting for the large public, meaning that there wasn't so many people working on it, but it wasn't understood very well before. And I understood it. So I'm happy I did that. It took a lot of effort to not read things as people thought they were and demonstrating that they were different. We deposit atoms and they find a place on the crystalline structure. And that is something surface science has worked and looked into. But when I started doing meta-organic vapor phase epitaxy in the sun, I realized that the literature which was dealing with that was, let's say, not very clear of why the hell things were organizing the way they were doing. So atoms were sticking in some place and not in another. Why? You have a crystalline structure organized in steps.
Yeah.
And those steps didn't look like the molecular beam epitaxy step that Armando Rastelli sees every day in his lab. And I was curious why the hell they look different. So I went to read literature, and there was very little about it.
Mm-hmm.
And in parallel, I was working on quantum dots and V-groove quantum wires. It's the same growth mechanism. You make a V-groove instead of a pyramidal hole, and then you deposit inside that, and you form a one-dimensional nanostructure in the middle, which is a groove. It's a single wire and not a quantum dot, but it has a 1 degree of freedom. Electrons can run freely in one dimension.
A quantum dot
that
is
was
just like one tiny piece of a wire, and then
it's a ball. It's a ball. So the electron cannot move anywhere. They have to stay in the ball. While if you have a wire, then the electron has 1 degree of freedom which it can move.
Correct. Yes.
Typically, you have quantum wells, and quantum wells means that you have 2 degrees of freedom in plane to move, but not in the Z direction. You're confined, they're forced state. Okay, so these are the typical nanostructures. You work with all of them. I was supposed to model those to explain how the growth was happening, and there were already models out there done in the group I was working into. So I was supposed to take those and grow them into bigger and better models. And I found that some of that wasn't satisfying. There's a lot of good stuff in it, just to make it clear. I built on whatever was done before. But there are some things we were forgotten. And I'm making a long story very short. They forgot that in meta-organic vapor phase epitaxy, there's a preliminary step to the atoms moving around. We don't send to the surface atoms. We send trimethyl gallium. Trimethyl gallium is a big molecule with 1 gallium atom and a lot of CH3 groups attached, and they need to go away. And so this trimethyl gallium gets absorbed on the surface.
Right.
And as a molecule moves around.
On the surface.
And yeah, on the surface. And what breaks it into smaller pieces that will eventually become only a piece of an atom of gallium on the surface is the surface itself. So the surface itself has a catalytic process cutting into little pieces the trimethyl gallium, losing CH group at the time.
Right.
And then at a certain point, what you're asked with the gallium atom that moves around. This is a very complex process because it means that, for example, you're not depositing in a uniform way, but you're depositing the meta-organic in a uniform way, but then it's moving around. So it accumulates in some regions and more, and some others don't.
Right.
And it actually will break into pieces more in some regions and less in others.
Correct.
So this is normal, right? You have a different type of surface, different catalysis, different breaking up. Correct. If you consider all this, then you can explain incredibly well, in a very simple way, both the formation of a quantum dot, the V-groove quantum wires, and actually the step organization on planar surfaces. After a few years being in Lausanne, everything's been add up. A single picture, which started at 3 independent, completely independent things, but they were actually explained by a very simple concept that just was forgotten by the literature. They just forgot that it existed. So I'm very happy that worked out.
That is so cool.
It took a long time to convince myself I was right, but I was right. Obviously, I didn't do it alone. I had Professor Vedensky in Imperial College, which was a great collaborator, and discussions with him, and his numerical models were essential to prove all this. Here in Cork, I'm getting Valeria did a fantastic job, and at the others too. There's been a lot of people who helped me into this process, but I've been driving it. I'm happy I did that. Even if it doesn't get a lot of attention or citations, it's something which I'm very proud of.
Yeah, these are the kinds of things that everyone wonders, and everyone is like, yeah, whatever. We will focus on the fancy flashy things. And instead of understanding the mechanism, but understanding what is actually happening in the vacuum, because no one can be inside the vacuum when this process is happening. So that is very important, and also opens doors to other discoveries. Okay, if this is what is happening to this combination and this sort of deposition, what happens? Is it similar or different kind of concept that is happening for other materials, right? This is like fundamentals of material growth. These are the kinds of things that I had to study during my bachelor or my master's. The nucleus forming, and then the growth mechanism, you need to understand it on the atomic level. So this is very important. Do send this paper as well. I will put a screenshot of it on YouTube. I will also link it in the description. I understand why you picked this as your favorite project, because I'm sure there are so many cool projects that you're working on and you have worked on, but this is something this is like the underdog project. Also, the way it came about, that it took you a while to convince yourself.
It took me a
that-
long time. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's, maybe I'm wrong, but how can I know this? But there are so many accomplished scientists today, and they were before me. Why didn't they figure this out? Thank you for sharing this. So what is clear to me, Emanuele, is that you love the research aspect, like just the way you explain the science and just the way you talk about it. But what I'm curious to hear is, what else do you like about being a group leader, or what else do you like about being a scientist?
There is the discovery part, which gives you satisfaction, right? You have a problem, you need to fix it. To fix it, you need to understand it. Okay, so that's the two things come together. So the understanding means going and studying and learning. And then once you understand some of it, you need to design experiments which rule out which of the potential hypotheses are the right ones. Sometimes you're lucky, you get an answer. Sometimes you're not. This stays as an open question. I still have things that I don't know why the hell, but they're there. So that's the discovery part, but it's also the learning part. I think the privilege of this job, and it's the only privilege, because there's a lot of other stuff which isn't really nice. You need to work very hard, many hours. You're always working. You just spend a life learning things. And if you are committed, you just keep on going. When I was 8 or 9, the basic ambition was to have a big encyclopedia where there was everything there. It's just too big.
Yeah.
There's no way you can possibly learn everything. So the other alternative, once you accept that, is I keep on learning what I can, one problem at a time. And how do I pick? Rarely I pick. I just happen to have a problem submitted to me, or we hit into where we go deep into it, the word or something. And this is true if you do Epitaxy or if you do quantum, which has a number of fundamental questions still open. There is a funny way of representing quantum as magical and impossible. And I remember a Times magazine cover saying, quantum computer is coming and nobody understands how it works. Come on. But that's not the way it is. We understand how it works. That's why we want to do it. There are open issues about quantum mechanics, relativity, why the hell the world is the way it is. And do we have a better model one day? Sure. But we do understand a number of things. Obviously, it comes also with discussions, collaborators. You don't learn alone. This magic idea that there is Superman who does everything and learns everything and the others listen, it's not what happens. What happens is that we are committed, we work hard, we train our brain to think in a certain specific way. And then we discuss and ideas come up. Sometimes you wake up 3:00 in the morning and say, yeah, I got it. That's it. That's what it is. Why the hell? I didn't think about it before. But very often it's somebody else who does that and comes and tells you. It's as good.
Yeah, absolutely. Mite also said that this idea, this lone wolf sitting and brooding, and then suddenly there is the idea that is coming, and that is not how this works. It's like a community thing. You work together on this.
So we are building knowledge one brick at a time.
Exactly.
There's a big wall there, and we bit to brick from time to time, and sometimes the bricks organize themselves in a way that, I can put another one.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the way it works, really.
You find a problem, you come across a problem, and you find a solution to solve it. And then the next one, and then the next one. I have to say, this keeps coming up time and again on Under the Microscope podcast, like this fascination and this childlike curiosity and drive to solve a problem. It's almost like doing a puzzle. Something is not working. Let me figure this out, and then let me bring my friends together to help. Let's all figure this out together, and then that's how it becomes like a project. And some parts work, and then you also discover other parts along the way. So it's also the journey towards the discovery as well. That is something that keeps people in science. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And from what keeps you in the science to what barely keeps you in science. So if you had 3 wishes to improve your research experience, what would you ask for? And I'm not promising anything here, okay?
No, I know that. So I listened to the previous podcast, right? So basically everybody has said, I would really love to have more time for research and have a bit less bureaucracy. And I agree. We work in a world where I spend most of my time filling forms, answering to emails on things which are not my research. Obviously, it would be too much to ask for an ideal world where I am the privileged who can do only what he likes and the others don't have to do that. Right? So life is,
you
these
don't
things
have
are
to be
necessary.
Realistic, Emmanuel. You don't have to be realistic with this. These are your wishes.
No, I'm saying it's normal to have other things to do. Work is about getting things rolling. But if we could have a better, more efficient world, that would be nice. And then maybe along to this, and then I will discuss another one, is the way we are funded to do the research is horrendously competitive in the setting up. You submit a proposal to Pathfinder in Europe, and there's 1,000 proposals submitted, and they fund 50, which basically means nobody gets funded, right? If you get funded, it's luck. It has to be good, but it's also luck. Somehow you get the right reviewers aligned in that moment of time, and you pick the right moment, because there's certainly another 100 good proposals.
Absolutely.
There are different levels of competition, and it is intrinsically a competitive process, but to the level where competition is a little bit used as an excuse for not putting enough funding in research.
Yeah.
I would love it to have a system which is not as bad as that, and where the funding goes to the things which are needed. Some countries are more lucky. They have 3-4% of the GDP invested in research. Some countries like Ireland only put 1%. It makes much more easy if you know that if you have a good proposal, if you're serious in the job you do, well, you will get the funding to do it. We are motivated by ourselves. We don't need somebody to push us with the competition.
Yeah.
The third one is a bigger wish, and how even us as a community, as researcher, talk about quantum mechanics. There is a mythological representation about quantum mechanics as being odd, magic, doesn't make any sense, nobody understands anything. They are gigantic ones. But 90% of the ones which are represented are a simple consequence of classical field description. I would love that things are explained in a different way to the public. For example, if you're Newton across the 17th and the 18th century, you're living, and you see the moon rotating around the Earth, or the Earth rotating around the sun.
Yeah.
You have a big problem, because you just demonstrated that there has to be a force, and it has to be 1/r², right?
Yeah.
And you say, okay, that's at the distance. What is actually transmitting the force? For Newton, that was a spooky action at the distance. The Earth there was no contact. There was nobody pushing, and the moon was attracted. There was no rope, nothing. Okay.
Yeah.
If you're from that world, there has to be a contact between bodies.
It is how it is.
I don't know, but that's how it is,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. No finger. I am not going to invent why it is like this.
Correct.
I'm saying it's like this. It works like this.
Yeah.
Okay, let's figure out what it is, and we have an explanation today, or a way of interpreting that today.
Correct.
Which involves fields.
Yeah.
In a way or another.
Yeah.
So we are today in a similar situation. We didn't get it fully clear, but this calling it a mystery, a magic thing, giving a representation, a quantum computer, we don't know how it works. That's not the right way of telling the story. Yeah. I think there should be a better way of telling the story, which is about fields, classical vibrations. It's you play the piano, you have a note which vibrates, and all the C will vibrate at the same time. And the A don't vibrate because it's only the C which vibrates, okay?
Yeah.
It's only some modes which can vibrate. That's it.
Yeah.
That's quantum mechanics in action. I would love to hear a different storytelling about quantum, even when we teach it. If I ask my students how tunneling works, half of them will have a very funny idea.
Yeah.
It needs to be done better as a community, not just as a special individual or whatever.
Yeah, I think, you're absolutely right. The quantum science or quantum mechanics needs to be explained in a better way that is not, it's some voodoo magic and no one understands it. And it's because, yes, it might be true that no one understands it 100%, but that is why we have scientists who are understanding a little bit more every day. Yeah, but I can imagine this can be frustrating. This is your day in and day out that you're thinking about it and you understand it, and then being represented, for example, by time and saying, oh, quantum computer, but no one understands how this works. That's how clickbait works. Everyone remembers that line.
That draws attention.
Yeah, but not the correct attention. But no, I understand that. The three wishes, just to summarize from you, would be lesser bureaucracy, not just paperwork, but also emails and everything. The second one is more fair funding distribution and better processes for the decision making, and the conversion rate also wish to be a bit better. And it's not just the fund allocators, but it is also everyone who is in that entire ecosystem, and that usually is the government. So better funding infrastructure, let's just put it that way, better funding infrastructure. Yep. And the third wish, better representation of quantum science to the public. So better science communication when it comes to quantum science. Is that fair? Is that fair to say?
It's a fair representation.
It's a fair representation. Okay, perfect. For example, my master and PhD work was with graphenes, or the hexagons. I would see them everywhere, and even now I see the hexagons being put on like the face cream as, oh, this is scientific, and I'm like, that is just misrepresentation and misuse of the hexagons that are being made popular for the honeycomb lattice, because that is like the stable structure and blah, 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 all of that, without understanding the science. And it still makes my brain itch. And I guess that is similar to what you experience.
Quantum lawnmowers, quantum stuff for the dishwasher, right?
Oh, God.
Quantum soap. Actually, I saw a quantum bricks, but quantum. There's plenty of quantum stuff all over the world. To basically say it's cool.
That is the misrepresentation and misuse of the scientific community, as like collectively should just trademark quantum science so that this term cannot be used, or a version of this term cannot be used for marketing or advertising purposes, where it is absolutely ridiculous. And that goes for everything with science. But yeah, I understand. That's quite an interesting wish. Actually, we have never had this. Your third wish, that's a very good one. You are absolutely right. This is something which is very important. Emanuele, this has been fantastic. Learning about your research, learning about your life as a scientist, learning about what you like, what you dislike in the current practices. But before I let you go, before we wrap up, I have one last question for you. And that is about your time on the Blue Sky account of Under the Microscope. So just for anyone who is new to this concept, this is a rotation curation account, a concept which was popularized on Twitter, which is now X. And now we have moved from Twitter to Blue Sky, which is a platform similar to Twitter. It's a microblogging network, social network, and every guest on Under the Microscope gets to post from this account for one entire week, starting from Monday until the Sunday. And in that week, they are the ones who are posting from that account. So what can the followers expect in the week that you will be taking over the Under the Microscope Blue Sky account?
Okay, so the plan is obviously to show the labs, to show what we do and what the students do. And hopefully I'm planning to do it in a way that is a little it also entertaining. For example, the entrance of our lab has a sign which says diagonally, like Harry Potter.
God.
I hope that the spirit will be maintained during the full week.
Oh my God.
It's a big sign, diagonally.
Oh my
So
God.
it took me some time to understand it was a game with diagonally. It's in Harry Potter, so it must be good.
It has to be, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the lab, the QuanTour light source as well, pictures with the suitcase.
And whenever we have leprechauns in Ireland, leprechauns might come out here and there. Leprechauns are little elves which live in Ireland. They might pop up.
Okay.
We have Halloween at the end of October. Halloween is an Irish thing. I mean, it became famous because of America.
But it comes from Ireland?
But it apparently comes from Ireland, yes.
Really? Halloween came from Ireland? Wow. Okay. Then we have to have spooky action when you're taking over the account, which is actually, let me just very quickly check, because I think your time on the Under the Microscope account is exactly at the end of October, 28th of October until the 3rd of November. Oh my God, there's going to be so much fun.
We'll see what we can do.
Oh, that's going to be so much fun. Oh, that is so cool.
So in the lab, we have the big spider, which we put on the MOVP machine.
Of course.
So when people come in, they see the spider.
Yeah. Just in case they missed, it's Halloween time. Please, lots of pictures, lots and lots of pictures of the lab, of the diagonally. Nerds. But
Yes, absolutely.
that would be fantastic. Super. Thank you very much, Emanuele, for speaking with me. This has been wonderful and cannot wait to follow your posts on the Blue Sky account of Under the Microscope. I hope this was fun for you as well.
It was. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Perfect. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you are not following the podcast Under the Microscope already, please do wherever you're listening right now. If you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe to it. If you're listening to Under the Microscope on Apple Podcasts, feel free to leave a review. That would be wonderful. If you're listening on Spotify, do share in the comments. How did you like this episode? What were your key takeaways? And please do follow Under the Microscope everywhere. This is absolutely for free for you, and it means the world to me, and it enables me in bringing more and more amazing guests to you. We have big plans for season 7. Thank you, and see you in the next one.
Before we wrap up today's episode, one last reminder about Twitter Insights Pro. If you're serious about securing your Twitter legacy, aligning your brand, or making the most of your content, Twitter Insights Pro has got you covered. It's simple. Download your archive, send it to us, and we'll take care of the rest. Make sure to check the link in the description to get started and take control of your digital legacy today.